Hi there. In today's episode of the Lighthouse Sessions, I'm really excited. I have my friend Alise Cortez with us. Alise and I met a while ago and we've nerded out on many things. Alise, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about who you are and what you do? Because I think we all need some inspiration today.
I'm in. Happy to be here too, Jeff. So I'm Alise Cortez, and my jam is really focused on the world of work and specifically leadership and culture. So company is called Gusto now, and really what we're up to is helping to develop inspirational leaders and managers who can nurture and coach and really cultures of gusto. I would like the world of work to work for more people, and for most people, it doesn't. We have a global engagement rate of 21%. In the United States, it's 31%. It is clearly not working for many people.
I love that. Now we'll go on some weird tangents, I'm sure, but let's talk about gusto because I love that word. And first and foremost, my manners should precede me. We were introduced by the wonderful and fabulous Wendy Lipton-Dibner, and hi, Wendy. Anyone she brings into my world has got to be fascinating to be in her orbit. So let's shut out now. Let's talk about gusto now. What is that? What does it mean?
So first we have to go back a bit in history here, Jeff, because I'm from a small town in Northeastern Oregon, very homogeneously white. I had the great experience in my mid-20s to live in Spain and Brazil for a total of 3 years. And those experiences tremendously formed my perspective of the world. I learned French in college, and then I was living and learning Spanish and then Portuguese in Brazil. So I really became what I like to call a Latina convertida, a converted Latina. And so I really absorbed the culture, and it's vibrant, it's passionate, it's expressive, it's there's you're all in the senses, if you will, and it's very expressive. So gusto means about the same thing in all the languages that I speak and work in, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. It means exuberance, zest, zeal, oomph, and so those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to introduce and help elevate inside the companies that I serve. And because it usually produces pretty darn good results, and it's a great, amazing, healthy place for most people to be in. If you want to be lifted and you want to be energized and you want to give your best work and the way that works best for you, that kind of environment seems to elicit a lot of really good stuff out of people.
I love it. Now, let's talk about your methodology, because I think that's, a lot of people, I've met people who, believe it or not, don't know the difference between motivation and inspiration. So
most people don't, I would argue. Yeah.
So let's start with, and this is my weird brain, but I always like to break down the terms that we're going to use. So what's the difference between motivation, inspiration, and really bluntly, why does inspiration matter?
Okay, we could talk about this for 6 weeks straight, but here we go. So between the difference between motivation and inspiration, and I want to give credit where credit is due. I learned this most expediently from my mentor, Dr. Lance Secretan. And so motivation is really about, pushing people to do something. It's an external motivational force. It comes more from oftentimes fear or lack or whatever on many levels. And inspiration is really more of a pulling force, and it's really developed or incentivized more from a place of love. It's really more about presenting a picture or something that's compelling in the future that people are actually opting toward, not running away from. And then maybe one of the most easiest ways to think about the difference is that motivation is about lighting a fire under someone, and inspiration is about lighting a fire within someone. And why do we need inspiration? Well, what we find increasingly in any of the literature and many of the futurist sort of books and leadership books is inspiration works. It's the thing that people are really looking for and wanting, especially in this age of technology, when anybody can, spit out all kinds of information and data. What people are wanting is that human connection, the ability to feel and be moved, etc. And so inspiration meets all of those requirements and works in a very, very handy way. So when we can inspire someone, we can really help them to enliven from the inside out and reach for more than they would ever do if they weren't inspired. Motivation is short term, and inspiration works more in a long term fashion.
I love it. And I think I'm a big nerd, so I love the quote from Archimedes, something to the effect, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum to place it, and I can move the earth.
Mhm.
I think motivation is kind of like a really weak, cheap fuel. It's like go to the
Yeah,
candy store
yeah.
and buying a pound of sugar and saying, okay, this is going to get me through the next year. You burn that fast, whereas inspiration is almost cold fusion, perpetual energy. Is that
Mhm.
fair?
I love that analogy. Totally. I mean, I just look at our journeys we were talking about before we got on air, being the entrepreneurs and such. I have been working at this for decades. And
Yeah.
this particular aim of meaning and purpose and elevating inspirational leaders and building cultures of gusto is about, I guess, 8 years in the making, something like that. And it is. I generally do work 6 to 7 days a week. And I mean, you're right. It's like, when does the flame burn out? Well, there are times when I'm like, all right, I am not working on Saturday. That's it. I'm not doing it. But it's not very often.
Yeah. Well, I like to explain it to people because I live with a bunch of, sorry, I call them muggles. I don't judge them, but they're very much employees, 9 to 5. They clock in, they clock out, and when they come home, there's actually a line from a movie we loved where she said, "I don't really think about work much after work," and then she says, "Or at work, actually." And I think that's the difference
Mhm.
is with motivation, you might get up at 6 a.m. 2 or 3 days, and then you're like, oh crap, it's cloudy, it's windy, it's whatever. Whereas inspiration, I'll wake up. Last night, my kid, he got up in the night because he needed a drink. He's like, Dad, what are you doing up at 2 a.m.? And I said, well, I had an idea and I had to test it. And he's like, well, shouldn't you go to bed? And I'm like, eh. But it's for
Eventually.
eventually. And that's, I think, the difference. Like, I tell people, and I have a bunch of people who come to me and say, Jeff, if I got this raise, everything would be better. And I'm like, you'll have temporary motivation boost, but without fixing whatever drains your inspiration, you're not going to keep at it.
So true. Yeah, it's magnificent. And when I'm out speaking, Jeff, that's one of my things is I'm an inspirational keynote speaker. And my whole thing is I want to see moist eyes. Yes, I want the emotional connection and touch, but I also want to be able to reach into their soul and make them want something more for themselves. And I can tell you it's happened. I remember I spoke at a conference, I think it was in April, and after I spoke, there were several people that waited to talk to me. And there was one young woman who appeared to be in her early 30s, white woman. Um, she waited for everybody else to finish, and she came up to me and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, before you spoke, I thought I was probably living below my potential. Now I know I am. And I'm going to do something about that. That's what I want, right? I
Yeah.
want that. You do that with inspiration.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem is, most managerial skills are, we fix the problem by beating it out of people, or,
Right.
we find a way to crush them so that they stop doing the bad behavior. And, I have this belief that people rise to the expectations you have of them. And if you find new ways to, I'm going to borrow your word because it's fun, but if you find new ways to inspire them, they will want to rise to your expectations.
That's right. Exactly right.
Whereas, I'm sorry, but the North American management technique seems to be shame people out of their bad behavior, which has not worked.
Well, the other reason I believe it doesn't work is because so much of the approach is about literally stapling people into rhythms that work for the organization, but completely diminish and smother the human soul.
Yeah. Minor detail, right? Let's just smother
Small
that human
oversight,
soul.
very small oversight.
And I think that's the aha moment is, if you light someone's candle, they're going to be way more excited about working with you, dealing with you, whatever it is. Whereas if you keep snuffing out their candle, they're going to resent you.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's why, by the way, really quick, Jeff, years ago when I was out speaking to an audience, it's like November of 2019, I think it was. And I love it when I come home and there's talk afterwards, but oftentimes when I come home, there's an email or a LinkedIn message waiting for me or something. People said something like, I don't want to say it in public, but this and this and this happened or whatever. And what I got so present to was people do need inspiration in order to be able to lift themselves from the everyday.
Yeah.
But when they get inspired and like, I want to go and pursue this thing. Well, then what happens is then they go back into their respective homes and all those people that we talked about when we got on air, tell them all the reasons it will never happen. It's not possible. They shouldn't pursue it. And the flame gets snuffed out.
Yeah.
And that's why I started my nonprofit called Purpose on Fire, which was designed to help assist and educate and advise people who had, come alive with an idea to help them try to bring it to life. And I didn't do much with it since the pandemic happened, but that's where it came from, was that because of that very reason.
Yeah, and I think there's so much magic when we start to find, and you and I talked before we recorded about Tony Robbins and the 6 basic human needs. I'm going to share this because I think you'll find it funny, but I've programmed an AI model that reminds me what my 6 basic needs are. And I've actually created a filter for it so that I have a matrix where it measures the trade-off to make sure my wife's needs and my kids' needs are met, so that it's us moving forward as a family, which is a little old-fashioned. But the aha moment is in communication. If we look for little ways to light other people's candles, those ripples go far and wide.
I love that, Jeff. That's it. You're never getting away from me.
And fair, I will connect you with some other people, but I live in a world of people who love the idea of, how do we inspire others? And I'm going to be honest, a lot of people, and, for most of us, there's a voice from our childhood, whether it was a disapproving parent or a teacher that told us we're not enough, we can't do this, we can't do that. And I think the greatest tragedy of humanity is that we believe those lies and we never revisit them.
Yes, agreed.
And a friend of mine said he's very much about his religion and his beliefs. And he said, my goal in life is to always be the person that helps others find their faith, and I will never be the person that helps them lose it.
Oh, that's
like,
beautiful.
What would life be like if we all had that simple mindset?
Well, I do like it's similar. It's not quite on the level that we're talking here, but I do think it fits and it's funny. It's the bumper sticker is, I strive to be the man my dog thinks I am.
Yes.
I think that's just so great.
Yep. And I think that's, if we all had that, I'm going to call it the North Star, whatever it is, maybe it's the person your cat thinks you are, or your kids, or whatever. Right. Life would be, and for me, it was when I had kids, I was like, I'm going to be the father I want them to have, and they're my little North Stars, and it's just amazing that I think a lot of people go through life rudderless.
Oh yes, no doubt.
And how do you? So this is going to be a strange question, but how do you ignite someone's purpose when they've lost their light?
Well, that's a good question. So that happens all the time. Let me situate that when I'm out speaking, invariably, there'll be a point in my talk, and it might be 10 to 12 minutes in, something like that, where I will say to the audience, what are you passionate about? And in that one instant, Jeff, what I've come to realize, how we get so much data from people, the top of people's eyebrows to the bottom of their hairlines.
Yeah.
In that one instance, I recognize a couple of things. One is that as I watch the crowd, they realize in that one moment, I don't have an answer to the question. Yeah. So, and what's fascinating is that's part of the ignition process, is for them to recognize, I don't know what I'm passionate about. Oh no, mayday, mayday. That's the first thing, is you got to take some awareness that I have lost my light. And that usually it's got to come from somewhere. You don't usually get it from within, usually. And so part of what I've come to understand is that a part of my work is really helping to wake the walking dead. Now, I am not judging anyone for being a walking dead person because I've also experienced that. I know what that's like. I just want to rescue a lot more people from that stance or trance, as we said before.
Yeah.
So, but so I think you have to be able to situate, goes back to inspiration. You've got to be able to situate or somehow intervene in that drift of people's lives where they're stuck on the hamster wheel or whatever it is that's caused them to lose that spark. Somehow interrupt that enough that they can see, ooh, there's a difference between how I am today and where I want to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you can do that, if you can somehow interrupt that, then you can start the journey. I have also met many, many other people who are really cool to be left in that drift, as we've talked about before.
Yeah.
It's comfortable there, it's fine in there, and don't bug me.
Yeah, it's literally a survival mechanism for people who, the way I see it, they're mourning the loss of their dreams that they don't believe in anymore. And
Yes.
if you wake them up, all they're going to feel is that disappointment. And I think
Yes.
a lot of people, that's where you see people, turning to self-medication of some format because they can't handle the reality that they're not living their dream.
I think that is incredibly insightful and well said, Jeff. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Now, let's talk about, so I'm a fan of yours. You and I are going to be friends. That's just not negotiable. Thank you, Wendy. How can somebody who's watching this, or I'm telling them they need to connect with you, how can they connect with you and how do they work with you? What does that look like other than, they're lucky enough to get invited to an event you're speaking at? Let's narrow their odds a little at waking up.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Great. Well, I think the first thing that I would ask people to do is just to come to my business website, which is gusto-now.com. When you come to that site, you'll learn a little bit about what we do inside organizations to develop leaders and managers, and then to help organizations through a consultative manner to elevate their cultures to cultures of gusto. So that's one thing. Then if you go to the training tab of the Gusto Now site, you will notice that when you click on that, there's the Gusto Now Academy. And that academy is designed to meet the needs of all kinds of humans walking the planet, individuals, etc. So it's an online platform, a learning community with right now 9 different learning journeys, whether you want to develop what you are doing inside your job for management, leadership, etc., or whether you want to work through loss, or whether you are one of those people that realizes, oh my gosh, there's no pulse on me, I need to awaken myself, or you want to work towards your higher potential. There is such community in there for you. So you can check that out. We've set it up as a subscription-based learning model. You can stay for as little or as long as you like. That would be a really great place to start. And that means that we could start working together immediately. You don't have to wait to, for when I'm going to speak, or if your company hires me to come work with the organization, you can plug right in on your own.
I love that. Now, you're being way too kind. I'm going to make you, by force or by whatever, reveal your podcast, please. Because
yeah, my podcast is called Working on Purpose, and I'm very, very proud to say that I've been hosting it for 10 and a half years. I think we have like 550 episodes, something like that. And it really is now, today, a thought leadership platform that advances the conversation on creating what I call destination workplaces, on elevating leadership, on situating organizations to do business that betters the world. And so there's something in there for if you're really trying to elevate yourself, learn and grow, it's a great place to be. I generally bring on authors. I read their book every single week, cover to cover. I take 25 to 50 pages of notes each and every week on that book, and that becomes research for my books, my speaking, etc. And then we write a newsletter the following week to tell people how to apply what we talked about. So it's a pretty comprehensive thing. If you plug into that, I can promise you, you will elevate your life.
I love it. And I admire that you didn't lead with that, because I think a lot of people want to plug their podcast. But for me, I want you to plug your podcast. So where can people go to listen to or engage with the podcast?
Pretty much anywhere you find or have your podcast. We live stream it to my YouTube channel, so you can find that there. So it's Working on Purpose Radio, because it's been on the air that long. We used to call it a radio. And then all the other places, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple, all those other places as well.
I love it. Now, I'm going to give my listeners a tip for how they can help you, Alise, because if we send them the link to go to YouTube, YouTube actually downvotes, doesn't give you traction for the activity. So all of you go in to YouTube and search for Alise's name and her podcast and click the link from the Google search. That will help her. It helps other podcasters. And if you got friends who have YouTube channels, do that for them because it helps. Now, the other thing I want to say is a really obvious way to help you. You've written a book or two, or three, or four.
Yeah, 5. Yes.
5.
Yeah. So here's on that note, you can always buy my books on Amazon. However, as an author, that's, one of the last ways that really works for authors because of how little we are compensated when you buy something off of Amazon. Jeff Bezos has never written me a thank you note for the money that I've made for him on the books that I've sold through his platform. So when you do go to my sites, you can go to alisecortez.com, and that's my personal site where I talk about speaking and podcasting and books, etc. If you want to buy 5 copies of any of my books at a time, I'll give you a discount. I'll sign all of them and I'll send them directly to you. That's the best way to get my books. And I would love, I'd love that. I love it when people buy my books in some kind of bulk.
Now, if you have Alise's book in your basket already on Amazon, I'm going to plug this for authors everywhere. Once you get the book, once you read it, please, for the love of God, go back to Amazon and leave a review. It is the greatest gift you can give an author.
So true.
We don't want to hand a tin cup and beg for money, but if you give a good review, an honest review, sorry, I'm going to be clear. I don't want to push for good reviews, but if you leave an honest review, the algorithms will make sure that Alise's books and other people's books make it to the top of lists and things. So it is the easiest thing you can do for an author, and yet oddly, the hardest thing most people forget about. So that's my new thing, Alise. As an author, whenever I read a book, I give a review because I appreciate it in return.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for that shout out. Yes, it makes a huge difference.
Awesome. And of course, you are on LinkedIn. Is there anything I should have asked you that we didn't come up with yet that you'd like to throw out as a final parting thought?
I guess what I would say to that, Jeff, that I've kind of really come to, as you can tell by the way that I do my podcast, it's a catalyzing learning agent for me. That's the way that I do it. Is I know it's very unique and most people don't do anything like that for their podcast. What I've really come to understand because of what I've learned in my podcast is just the various ways that, the multifaceted workforce that is out there and available. When you think about, the world is populated by whatever it is, 9 billion people. And most of those people really do want to work and need to work, but they need to do it on their own terms in ways that work for them and that by which they are motivated by. Learning how to understand that dynamic and attract more people, whether they're part-time people, they're fractional employees or whatever they are, and supporting what they're trying to do with the rest of their lives, you will go a long way in your business if you can start to think about relating to your workforce on their terms and meeting them where they need to be and want to be, and then inspiring them to want to be part of your organization because you have met those needs.
I love that. And by the way, if you don't meet those needs, they're going to do just enough to not get fired. Is that fair?
That's exactly right. And while they collect the paycheck and keep the seat very nice and warm where they're sitting.
Yeah. It's called stagnation. But anyways, that's another conversation. Well, Alise, I want to thank you for, number one, hanging out with me, but also for being on the show today.
It's an absolute delight, Jeff. So glad to know you.